Start recording and go over here. Should still be up. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so I got some requests for Holy Shock Paladin, like, you know, just guide in general and stats and figures, people who don't want to get on the private server and actually look at everything and so forth and so on. So that's what we're actually going to be doing today. There'll be a lot of math. I've attempted to make this video like 5 times, but there's always something that goes wrong. Or something new I learned that's like, oh god, this actually changes things. The Holy Shock build is actually growing on me, but it's only growing on me if it has like spirit behind it. But we'll get into why that is in a second. There we go. Alright, ready to rock. Alright, so let's actually see what this thing looks like in combat a little bit. You're going to see it's got some pretty serious mana issues. Other things, blah, 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 blah. Whoa, get out of here. Pretty hefty. Alright, so let's start with stats. You can see we've got close to 12k hit points, not quite 12k hit points. If you're partnered with another Paladin, you guys don't have kings, ugh. If you're partnered with another Paladin, there might be a Blessing of Sacrifice being used somewhere in there. So we can definitively say that we have about 12k hit points. Mana bars, like, you know, oh, that's not bad, about 10k mana. What do we got for spell power here? Yeah, we got about 1100 spell power currently, but that's because we're using a flask and wizard oil. That's just so I don't have to pop any of these PvP trinkets and try to do math based upon the PvP trinkets. I basically am just like, yeah, whatever. I'll get a little bit of extra spell power, and I'll do all my math based around that, and you know, go from there. What else is interesting here? Let's start with the healing capabilities. So you're gonna, why do you do this? The base healing capabilities are actually kind of shit. You're gonna see that we're able to heal about 30% of our total hit points. This is our Librem, I think. It gives us MP5 every 30 seconds when we cast Holy Light. Yeah, so that's about 30% HP heal. If I do a max rank Flash of Light's pretty efficient at 180, but the Holy Lights are like 840. So the Flash of Lights are healing for about, that's not helpful. Ugh, less than 10%. That was probably like 8%, maybe 9, probably about 8%. Let's see. Holy Shock heal crit last time. Yeah, 1400. That's only with like a plus 1000 healing. So the 2 specs that I'm suggesting for Holy Shock is everyone's going to try to tell you to take out the like pure DPS spec, the one that's just spell power, intellect, and like no mana regeneration whatsoever. But as we're going to see here in a second, let me actually empty this mana real quick. Once your mana is gone, you have nothing. Right, we can crit heal. Fuck. There's a Consecration. Consecration's cheap, 660 mana. Interesting. Holy Shock, 650. Yeah. Why don't I just cast Seals till I am? What am I, retarded? Seals, Consecrations. You're going to see that the mana regeneration levels are actually horrifying. Okay. So we got about 10 mana every 2 seconds while not casting. Then it kicks up to 200 to... Oh, this is why it's buffing it a bit. 300. Yeah, it's about 40 mana a second. With our absolutely, I think it's minimalistic spirit. If I go over here to stats. Stats? Yeah, this is no bonus spirit in the set whatsoever. 40 mana regeneration. It's like 20 mana a second. That's nothing. You're going to be here for literally ever and a day trying to regenerate your mana bar. So once you're out of mana in this build, you're basically done. So the healing levels are quite poor, but they're unserviceable if you're using Flash of Light, but they are serviceable if you're healing yourself with Holy Light. If we switch out the gear to be more like plus 1600 healing, to be more like 800 bonus spell damage, or to basically to minus 200 bonus spell damage. And hello, what's up? No thanks. Yeah, so if we minus it to be... what I'm suggesting is that we actually go with like a bunch of spirit and like plus healing and then bonus spell damage and stuff like that. God damn, those rep paladins run out of mana fast. That is okay. Alright, so let's go find a target dummy. Well, I guess we're just going to be stuck with this one. Let's get some might going here. I'm going to show you guys how quickly this thing runs out of mana. But I'm also going to show you what its DPS capabilities are. Got everything? We're good to go here? Alright, so now what I want is I want to stack up Vengeance 3 times on the target. Doesn't really matter if we do Seal of Righteousness or not. Let's get our free crit heal in there. Sweet 2, 3. Alright, good. We got 3 stacks. Okay, so Holy Shocks now. Got everything? Yeah. Holy Shocks do about 1,700. Judgments, as you can see, that's not very helpful. Consecration, I think, is like 285 right now. 265? That means I'm missing something. I am missing something. What am I missing? Hello, Shadow Bolt boy. Oh, I'm missing this. Derpa. There we go. Alright. Judgment, 2,200. Not very... Oh, that was a Holy Shock crit, actually. Yeah, 2,500 for Holy Shock crits is pretty normal. This should be about 1,700. This should be 285 now. So you can see this adds like 200 spell power, 219. You get a Libram for it maybe somewhere, and it'll pump it up a bit more to like 250, but I just calculated it being like 200 right now. That's a Holy Shock. This is a Judgment. I'll keep doing this until... Look at our mana bar. I'll keep doing this until our Holy Shock decides not to crit. Jesus. It should be 1,600, 1,700. Alright, come here. Come here. Don't... Fuck off. We are waiting another 15 seconds. Oh boy. The Righteousness up. Seal of Righteousness cranking out about 350. It's not bad with the 1.6 weapon. I'll get all the math for you in a second here, but I just want this Holy Shock not to crit. You want to know what our critical strike chance is? It's 25% for holy spells. So, yeah, this is not normal. La 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 la. Don't crit. Fuck. So, what's funny is if you're making a video, this is not what I want to see. But if you're like in PvP, this is like the best thing ever. Okay, 1,700. Jesus Christ. Okay, but also notice how quickly we would run out of mana. So I'm going to do it more seriously here in a second. But basically what happens is you can burst pretty hard and then heal yourself afterwards and then burst again. But that's almost all the mana bar you have. It's like inside of like a 9-second burst, or like a, we'll call it like a 2 Holy Shock or a double, a triple Judgment burst, which is, 16 seconds for triple Judgment, and then it's 15 seconds for a double Holy Shock. Within that 16-second burst window, you're going to eat like 50% of your mana. So this isn't a damage test. This is just a mana consumption test. Alright, Judgment, stun, blah, blah, blah. Throw out the stun, get a consecration going here. Don't have my action bars set up properly, so I'm just clicking shit. Recast Seal. Okay, that was second Judgment. And blam. And I'll get out one more Judgment, and we'll back away. And let's say you have to heal yourself like a couple times. I'll get a 60%. That's a pretty good heal. You can see that our mana is close to 50%. We got a little lucky with the critical heal, so we got 800 more mana than normal. So if I actually put another heal in and it doesn't crit, we actually see what our mana levels would probably... Yeah, it's about 50%. So you got about enough mana to come in here and basically do everything all over again. So we're going to do some consecrations, going to reseal, gonna probably want to throw out the stun. Yep. Reseal again. I want this second Holy Shock and third Judgment. And then we're out. Second Holy Shock and third Judgment. And you can see that we almost don't have enough mana to get the job done. Right? Like, we got a little bit more mana to work with here, but you're going to... Basically, you got 2 bursts, you're and then you're out. And it's not really what I'm into. Now, let me switch out some gear here to show you what I'm thinking about more accurately. This should be ornamented. Yeah, let's go with some ornamented here. Here's the healing. Oh, yeah. Lightbringer, sure, why not? Lightbringer, sure, why not? Trying to get this up to 1600. Ornamented, why not? Ornamented, why not? You're going to be wanting using like 5-piece lamellar, and then the rest or 4-piece lamellar for its bonus. You could, and then the rest is like spirit gear, like I show in the other videos. I guess I can pull it up right now. Pause the video real fast. Okay. So what I'm talking about is we're going to be stripping out some of our gear. This is the other option. Rather than being like a full DPS spec, you strip out some of your damage, resilience, critical strike gear, and pick up things like Boots of Divine Light, things that have like high levels of stamina. Less important for the Holy Shock Paladins, but really you're after the spirit and some healing. There's some other items around here that either are or are not competitive with what you might want to be switching them out with. Like this stuff is somewhat comparable over here, and you pick up a lot more spirit. For example, this blue socket here is worth like 12 stamina. So this thing actually is saying that it's got 27 stamina on it, and compared to 29, you're picking up good chunks of spirit. And we'll talk about why that's important when we get into the math section of this video. But for now, I'm gonna. I think you're trying to go for like 800. You're trying to get this to be about 17 hundo. Do I switch out the weapon? Is the question? Probably not. Let's keep switching out some gear here. Intellect, damage and healing. That's not a thing. Spell damage and healing. This has also got some spirit on it. That's kind of interesting. Whatever. We're just after the damage and the healing, and we're after healing and damage. Lamellar, Jesus, just give me the damn. Come on, let's go. I want 1700. You can see that the ratios are really fascinating. You actually have to switch out a lot of your spell damage gear in order to get plus healing, but your spell damage actually doesn't go down. So it's literally like, if I sacrifice 200 spell damage, because that's what I'm going for, I gain like plus 500 healing. It's kind of nuts here. Still looking for stuff. Okay, here's some plus healing gear. Okay, we're getting there. Almost there. Lol. Where are the rings at? Neck piece, damage and healing. Okay, cool. So we're close to 1700 now. Okay, we'll call it good. If I strip off these, you can see we're at about plus 800 healing. So yeah, actually, if I strip this off, what happens? Yeah, we're still a metric shit ton of spell damage. Holy shit. I want to strip off more gear. Damn. Alright. Yeah. Healing done. Damage done. What is this? This is the neck. Ornamented. Lamellar. Yeah, I guess I can't get any more plus healing gear on this character. I can if I switch out the weapon, but I really don't want to. Alright, so I guess we're more spell power than I thought we were. But whatever. Now let's see what we're doing now. Our Holy Shock heals for 2,000 base, up from like, what was it, like 1,400 last time? Last time it was doing like 11% of a heal. Now it's probably doing more like 15%. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. Oh shit, our stamina went way down. Yeah, that's why we have to spec in such a way that we're not losing too much stamina. These gear pieces are not they're not itemized for stamina. Bit of an issue. All right, holy flashes, which is not really a thing on this paladin, but it's important for the other paladin. You can see it's over 10% of our life now. It's like 12% life heal. Holy lights, which are the big ones you're going to be using as a Holy Shock Paladin, did not go up that significantly. It was like 3,500 before, and now it's okay. Well, I guess that was a low roll. 39. Okay, yeah. So our plus healing went up a bit. It's less important that we're picking up the plus healing on this character than it is, even though it's probably a big deal, than it is that we're just picking up the massive metric shit tons of spirit that are supposed to go with this gear. But we'll talk about that later. And our DPS is probably not all that worse off for wear, but we'll get into that when we also do the math. The subject, I just wanted to show the plus healing. I'm not really going to showcase Seal of Vengeance too much, just because I think the way it's scripted on the private servers is extremely disingenuous. You're going to see that it doesn't proc every auto attack. It's procking every auto attack right now, but it's not normal. See, it just missed one, missed two, procced. It doesn't proc every auto attack. And then once it stacks up to 5, it doesn't apply its dot damage instantly. I'm kind of, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that in one of the later patches in TBC, private servers are notorious for rolling out, they literally follow the patch cycle with all the spells and abilities as closely as possible. I'm gonna judgment damage in here, see what it does. Not insignificant judge damage. Sanctity Aura, put this Seal of the Crusader up on the target. Go back to Vengeance. Yeah, so it might be that in actual TBC we'll get the later form version of Seal of Vengeance. I'm expecting it to be in the form of it procs virtually every auto attack regardless of weapon speed, and it definitely applies the full dot damage every melee swing after it has completed 5 stacks. I do believe that's the final iteration of Seal of Vengeance. All right, so let's get out of here real fast. So I'm gonna show Druid here for just a second. Nothing too interesting to see on the Druid. I just want you to be aware of the type of heals that they have available to them. They have this Life Bloom shit, which lasts 7 seconds. It's instant cast hot. And what it does is after 7 seconds, it heals pretty good tick, but we'll get the math on this later. After 7 seconds, it does a big boy heal that can crit. Then they have this other hot that lasts 12 seconds and ticks every 3. But again, I got the math on that later. Lasts 12 seconds. Then they have a hard cast that they can do, which I think does like half the healing up front. That's the 2000. And then it ticks every 3 seconds as well. That's the 400, I think. Yeah, 400. But it lasts like 24 seconds. Base health on a Druid, I think it's about 11k. And then they got mana. And they also have like 30% base stats. 30% of their spirit, which they take some spirit with them, is regenerating during combat, which is right here. It's one of their talents, and that's basically just what you're going to have to be dealing with. Cyclone. Not sure if you can cleanse Cyclone or not. It might be a physical, but then it might be like the patch cycle thing. Like it starts off as physical, and then eventually they make it magic, so it can be cleansable. Don't quote me on that one. Cyclone is a bit of a weirdo. It's also completely bullshit that they gave Cyclone to a Druid to begin with. Alright, so let's get out of here and let's go to the math side of our video. La 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 la. Alright, so I want to open... First I'll get this on the screen just in case you want to see some stats. So I actually went through and I looked at all the burst damage gear. If you haven't seen the other videos, like the Argent Defender Paladin videos, I would actually highly suggest watching the Argent Defender Paladin videos as well as the Holy Shock Paladin videos to try to figure out what Paladin you're going to be most interested in, because a lot of the gear you're going to be using and the tactics you're going to be using synergize. There's a lot of overlap. The actual feel and play of the two styles is going to be extremely different. But what you're actually doing combat-wise is going to be, and the gear you're using is going to be remarkably similar. So what I did is I went through and I looked at all the damaging abilities. I got their mana costs. I got how much damage, what their damage range is. I got the cast times, blah, 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 blah. In general, what I discovered is that people's burst damage in TBC is about half of the burst damage it is in Classic World of Warcraft. So some of the highest burst damage outputs are like an Elemental Shaman, which you don't really see in 2s and arenas very often. They can do a wombo combo of like 3,000 damage and then like, almost 2,500 damage if both of these crit. Their spells also have a chance to like proc an additional spell cast that does like 50% extra damage. That's why I have it here where it's like there's a chance that it does an extra 800 and then it can crit for like 1,600. So their wombo combo can be like 5,500, but that's the highest. Second highest was a Frost Mage, a Frostbolt crit followed by a Fire Blast crit, not very likely. Still doesn't quite reach 5,000. And then everybody else's critical strike burst potential is very minimalistic. The vast majority of spellcasts, besides the ones listed, are 1,500. 1,500 Mind Blast, 1,500 Warlock Shadow Bolt, 1,500 Frost Bolts. 1,500 lightning bolts, 1,500 holy shocks, 1,500 judgments, 1,500, 1,500, 1,500. The theme of the expansion is fucking 1,500. The only difference in the bursts is whether or not they can they crit for 50% or they crit for like 100%, right? So like the Warlock Shadow Bolts, 50% crit. Shadow Priest, Mind Blast, 50% crit. Frost Mages, 100% crit. Blah, 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 blah. Shamans, 100% crit. Other things of note, Chain Lightning does not ×3 on a single target anymore. So if you get Chained Lightning as a guy out in the middle of nowhere, it's only going to hit you one time. If you get Chain Lightning in 2s, worst case scenario, it's hitting you for like 3,000 damage, I think. Bouncing to your ally for 2,000. And then bouncing back to you for like 1,000. So it'll hit a single target if it's bouncing for like 4,000 damage. Which is a potential wombo combo with Earthshock. Like, Chain Lightning crit into Earthshock crit is still going to possibly get up there to like, 6,400 damage or something like that. But that's about the highest possible. They got some pretty serious mana issues, the Elemental Shamans. Well, Elemental Shamans are weird. Their Lightning Bolt is extraordinarily mana efficient. But if they're doing anything on top of the Lightning Bolts, then they become very mana inefficient. Everybody around here is pretty mana inefficient, except for like a few spells they have, which are highly mana efficient. It's just what it is. But you can look at this at your leisure. This is not the thing I wanted to pull up, though. Let's see here. I want to go talk about this page right here. Okay, so what I want to talk about first here is up in the top left. So this is like the base spell power ratios for virtually all your abilities. Seal of Righteousness is getting about a 10. This is on private servers. It's getting a 10% spell power ratio per second per second of melee swing. So we were swinging like a 1.5 speed weapon. Therefore, it was getting 15% spell power ratio. For swinging at 2-second speed, it's going to get 20% spell power ratio. 10% per second from SOR melee. Then also 10% per second from SOR judgment. Then 10% per second from a consecration tick. And then 10% per second from a holy shock. 15%. And then 10% per second from Seal of Vengeance. So there's basically a fucking theme with your spell power of like, 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%. Oh, I think we're going to do 10%. And you can calculate your damage from there. I actually want to pull up a talent calculator. So I want to go like TBC talent calculator. But I want like an endless TBC talent calculator. Right? One of these calculators, okay, yeah, that's fine. The thing with the Holy Shock Paladins, however, let's do this one first. I screw it up if I don't do this one first. We get 5. I know we get 5 here. I know I put 3 here. I might as well get Illumination because I want that free crit. If I recall, where's the other point go? I can't remember. Anti-fear? Curse and disease effects. Yeah, sure, I'll get some anti-fear. And then we'll go 4 here. One more anti-fear. Yeah. So you only need 4 in holy power. I suppose you can put 5 if you strip this one out. Put 5 in there and get 1 in here. Definitely want to improve judgment. We don't go that. We go improve this. 3 here. And then I would totally want 5 in this thing. What else are we getting? Increased damage against humanoids. Totally pick this up. Get 2 here, 1 there. 1 here, 1 there. 5 out of this. Yeah. So Holy Shock changes these ratios. The Holy Shock build changes these ratios somewhat because they're picking up improved Seal of Righteousness, which changes the math on the Judgment of Righteousness and the melee damage of Judgment of Righteousness. They are picking up Sanctity Aura, technically improved Sanctity Aura, which changes the math, and then they possibly have Vengeance rolling, which also changes the math. So the math is subject to the talent points. Control C, Control V. And for the record, I'll throw down the Argent Defender Paladin build, just so we can see it for comparisonal purposes. Ooh, strip 1 out. Yep. 2, and then 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1 and 3 and 2 and 2, 1, 5, 2. Yep. 5 and 1. And there should be 3 floating talent points in this build. And the idea with the Argent Defender build is one Paladin picks up 3 out of 3 improved concentration aura, and the other Paladin picks up 3 out of 3 vindication. But we'll be talking about this much later down the line, the comparison between the two specs. Okay, so what I have going on here is I have the spell power ratios here, and then down right below them, I've got what we can expect. Let me actually get like a highlighter thing going here. Box, perhaps? Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, look at you. Look at you. Okay, and then right here, what we have is I calculated what a 9-second burst looks like for 2 Holy Paladins, right? Like 2 Holy Paladins that are using their stuns back to back for a 9-second stun, and then they're using their free Holy Shock critical. So now we're getting like a 2,500 Holy Shock critical. We're doing 4 17-second, 8-second. My bad, 1,700 8-second cooldown. Judgments of Righteousnesses, because one of them is front-loaded, right? Like you're judging righteousness, and then 8 seconds later, you're judging another Seal of Righteousness. So you're getting 2 Seal of Righteousnesses in judgments inside that 9-second window, and then there's 2 Paladins, so it's times 4. These are the consecration, I think, 280 times 6. Melee DPS, you're doing about 200, a little bit over 200 melee DPS, and then you're doing it for 9 seconds times 2, so for 18 seconds. And Seal of Vengeance, it does a bit more damage. We didn't showcase it in the actual spell power gear, but it does about 100 base DPS. And then on top of that, you got Vengeance and all the other Sanctity Aura and blah 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 blah, which pumps it up a bit. But I calculated the DPS burst potential is about 19k. And then I came over here and I looked at can we burst out a Druid, and the answer was actually quite interesting. Here and here is how could we burst out a Druid if it was like yeah, like what do we need to burst out a Druid? And the answer is if the Druid is inexperienced and he's only got like these 2 hots up, and he doesn't have like the third cast hot up, the one that you actually have to hard cast on yourself, or if he's inexperienced in the sense that the burst is coming but he hasn't refreshed his hots on himself very significantly. So the hots are going to fall off. Some of the hots are going to fall off like halfway through the 9-second burst. You can expect them to have between like 17 and 18k effective hit points, and your 19 burst pumped into a 17 to 18k effective hit point. It might kill the Druid in the burst window, but it depends on like what the comp is looking like. Like if it's like Druid Warlock, then the Warlock's not going to be doing anything to stop the burst into the Druid, because it's like, you know, fear and then cleanse, and you don't really lose any DPS whatsoever. If it's Rogue Druid, for example, then I imagine the Rogue is going to be significantly more effective at peeling off the damage. It's also important to note as we go forward that a lot of this damage is not subject to peel. Like Seal of Vengeance damage is not subject to peel. Consecration damage is not subject to peel. Peeling meaning that they're like stunning you or fearing you. They're like, hey, they're trying to not. They're trying to mess with you and your DPS as much as possible during the burst. Seal of Righteousness isn't well peelable. This isn't well. The only thing that's actually well peelable under a burst is your melee DPS. So the vast majority of your damage is actually not well peelable, and it gets even more. This is also true if the opponent is like kiting you, like if they're doing things like they're let me think, they're cycloning and fearing both of you simultaneously, and then trying to get distance, and then rinsing and repeating that over and over and over again. They're actually not cutting down on your DPS as much as you would think, because again, Seal of Vengeance is going to be running almost constantly. Every time you're pumping a consecration into them, we'll talk about how to do that later. It's not being interrupted at all. Seal of Righteousnesses aren't really being messed with too terribly much under those conditions, and your Holy Shocks aren't being screwed around with also. It's only the melee DPS that the kiting and the peeling is going to significantly affect. Kiting will affect more DPS because you'll lose some of the DPS and the other things, but peeling is not going to be a significant hindrance to the DPS. But a rogue can definitely do it because they're going to be stunning the shit out of everything in its dog while you're trying to burst on the druid. If the druid is experienced, however, and because you can see the burst coming a mile away, because how the burst actually has to take place is the Holy Shock Paladin. Let me make sure I'm actually recording here. The Holy Shock Paladins, they have to use up almost half their mana bar bursting on the target out the gate, and then getting out PvP trinket from whatever target they want to try to kill. Then they have to heal themselves to full, so now they're going to be at about half mana. And then they just have to wait out like the 50 seconds or so. It's a little bit less than 50 seconds. It's actually like 44 seconds or so in order for their stuns to both be off cooldown when they finally pull the trigger on the burst. They'll probably predicate the burst by pumping some damage into the druid ahead of time. You know, making sure they have Seal of Vengeance 5 out of 5 before they actually pull the damage on the burst. And then they have one opportunity to pull the damage on the 9-second burst combo before they're effectively and then they can't really do anything from there. So it's pretty highly telegraphed when they're going to burst. They don't really have any other options because they're not taking any spirit gear. So they've only got mana enough for this one trick. They're like a one-trick pony duo spec. So if the druid's not fucking dumb, first off, he's geared so that he's a bit tankier than he would normally be otherwise because he's going against a serious double DPS burst comp. Secondly, he's making damn sure to keep everything as refreshed as possible for when he finally gets hit when he finally gets nailed with the double burst, which means he's going to have this 24-second up. He's going to have his life bloom at full. He'll probably be spamming it into oblivion, and all these things are going to be running at full effect during those 9 seconds. And if the druid does that, he ends up having about 19k hit points, which means he may or may not die in the burst, right? 19k effective hit points to 19k effective burst. And it really depends upon the comp as to whether or not we're looking at a dead druid and a little bit of the RNGesus, because I did not factor in critical strike chance into these Seal of Righteousness judgments into the target. I also didn't factor in, maybe they have some chip damage on them a little bit, but I don't know. So it's like, I can foresee, like, Druid Warlock might get clapped out of existence. Like, they might get popped. But they would, if they're smart, they just gear a little differently, and maybe they greatly increase their chances to survive. Druid Rogue, I can see being surviving that pretty easily. I don't know how Druid Warrior would do under those circumstances. Warrior peeling under these conditions is probably pretty bad. But you can see it's technically a toss-up as to whether or not you'll be able to pop the druid out of existence. Hey, Amy, what are you doing? Okay. Anyways. What the hell was I talking about here? The other weird thing about the composition is you might, even if you successfully burst out the healer in a 2v2 spec, you might end up losing, depending upon what class you're going against, you might end up losing 1v2 to the remaining, or 2v1, 1v2 to the remaining class, like the SL Warlock, for example. And the reason for that had to do with just how horrifyingly pathetic our spirit regen was once we ran out of mana. So our DPS is reasonable once you run out of mana. It's not complete dog shit. It's probably going to be about 1,300 or 300 DPS on target, give or take. You can still use, what the hell is it? Judgments of Wisdom and Seal of Wisdom and stuff to desperately try to maintain. But if you're low enough mana after bursting out the healer, there's a strong possibility that you die to that Arms Warrior, that both of you die to that Rogue. And I'm not joking about this, because your mana regeneration is absolutely non-existent. Okay. So that's the first few things on this list. And then I start talking about variance here. So variance this is like the stats on like the burst spec. It's like this is what you're kind of healing for. Like, you know, you're trying to live off your 3,500 Holy Lights and your 1,400 Holy Shocks. You've got about 1,200 effective spell power, a little bit more when you're bursting. The healing, this is just the stats, the burst comp. And basically what I'm suggesting that we do is rather option 2, this is option 1, we go double burst, we have no sustain behind it. But what I'm really interested in looking into is, what if we swap out like 200 of that spell power for like 500 plus healing, or even more. Like we were trying to get ourselves to like 1,700 plus healing, maybe a little less, hard to say. But we start sacrificing spell power for plus healing. What are the effects of that? And you saw it on the private server just how hard it was for me to actually lower my my spell power, even when I was switching it out for plus healing gear. Like, the math is really weird. There's a lot of spell damage on the plus healing gear, and so swapping spell power, swapping spell damage for plus healing is not as painful as you'd think it would be statistically. Okay, so what are we doing? We end up losing like spell critical strike. We lose resilience off our gear. Not super important, to be perfectly honest. Losing the resilience. We get better heals, but more importantly, we're trying to pick up about 200 to 300 spirit from all that spirit gear that I was showing you before. You can check out the Argent Defender videos to get a really good idea of all the spirit gear, like stuff like this. You know, you're trying to switch out your pieces, and you're picking up, like, on average, I think per piece of gear, you're picking up like 30 spirit. That's like 30 here, and like 42 there, and 17 there, and 37 here, and blah, 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 blah. Boots of Divine Light was a really good example, because you don't lose on the hit points, you pick up some spirit, you don't really lose too much on spell power, blah, 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 blah. So we're trying to sacrifice spell damage for spirit. Like, what are the effects of this? Like, let's just go down Theorycraft Lane and see what happens. Total overall loss in DPS is going to be about 17%. Sounds significant at first, I know. However, your MP5 is absolutely insane. And it really depends on how you use it. So in the Argent... Oh, God. Let me get my thoughts here. Give me a sec. So in the Argent Defender videos, what I basically point out is Paladins have a hidden unique ability, because we're basically auto-attack Andes, that if we're not casting our spells on cooldown, like if we're being more conscious about when we're actually casting our spells, what ends up happening is we can maintain large chunks of spirit tick uptime without actually losing any significant DPS. And you can kind of see that right here. Like, this is the your primary proposed damage rotation. And the idea is, I call it spell fasting. So every time you 6-second stun your opponent, and you got 6-second stuns available like every 15 seconds between the two of you, so you're able to stun the target for 6 seconds and then have like a 19 seconds of downtime, and then stun them for 6 seconds and then have 19 seconds of downtime, like indefinitely on these two Paladins. It looks a little differently for the... So the idea here is that inside this 6-second stun window, you're getting out... you're doing everything, right? You're consecrating, you're judging into the target, you're recasting your seals, you're healing if you need to, you're getting out like you're treating it like a burst, basically. You're doing everything plus healing inside the 6-second stun window. Basically, the idea is if you cast any spell whatsoever, you're casting all the spells. Like, you're not messing around, right? Any spell that is being forced to cast on you is go time on casting just about any other spell that is relevant at that point. Because you're trying to maintain these long periods of time where you don't have to cast the spells, and then high uptime on the DPS when you do end up casting the spells. And we can see here that what ends up happening is... I actually redid the math on this. The math on this is actually off. Let me fix that. Ugh. It's this... find this here. But as you can see here, we're actually maintaining about a 400... yeah, there we go. A 50% tick uptime, which means that we're... but depending on what spirit level we're taking... Let me just... Come on, guys. Just give me a sec here. It's actually closer to 500. Yeah, whatever. We'll do red. 500 to 600 DPS. Like, I redid the math on this entirely. So most of my math was done off of a single Seal of Righteousness judge inside the 6 seconds. And then later I was like, well, screw that. Let's actually go for 2 Seal of Righteousness judgments inside the 6 seconds. How does that change our DPS? And how does that change the math? It changes the math in the sense that we actually have less downtime. Less spirit fasting time. So this 50% ends up becoming more like a 45%, but the DPS shifts by a significant margin, so it's totally worth it. Okay, let's see here. So depending upon your spirit levels, so like 200 spirits probably going to give us something like 70 mana back a second during spirit regen. And 300 spirits going to give us more like 100 mana back per spirit tick. And if we're maintaining like a 45-second spirit tick uptime, calculator. So this is a 15-second cycle times 0.5, 50 second times 0.45. Okay, so like 22 seconds at like 70 mana is giving us back like, almost 1,600 mana. What was that, like 22.5 times 100? Let's say if we're at 300 spirit, is giving us back over like 2,500 mana. You can actually calculate like the mana consumptions. Like our holy lights were like 800 mana. You're probably doing like 2 of those per paladin every every 15-second cycle. So that's like 1,600 mana. They may or may not crit. Illumination. Blah 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 blah. We were doing 4 Holy Shocks at like 1,650 each, so that's like another 1,300 mana consumption for like the 2 Holy Shocks. The Judgments and Reseals are actually pretty cheap. They're about 200 mana each, so we'll just say 500 mana consumption, and then that's about it. So in total, maybe you're spending like 3,500 mana. We'll be super disingenuous and wait a minute. Did I calculate 2 judgments? Yeah, so I need, we'll say it's about 250 mana for a judgment, and then I'm doing it twice, which means I need like 2 reseals, whatever. We'll say you're consuming like 4,000 mana every 4 seconds, right? And we'll say you only took like 200 spirit. So you're only at like 70. We'll highball it and we'll lowball it. That's still 270 times 22.5, 1,500. And then you're probably pulling back like a metric shit ton of mana from Judgment of... Judgment of Wisdom is actually giving you a shit ton of mana also. So we'll say Judgment of Wisdom is giving you like another 1,500 mana, which is completely reasonable. You got like 1.5 second auto attacks. We'll just do the math here. We'll assume it doesn't change from Classic WoW, but it might change from Classic WoW. So you're getting like 75 auto attacks inside the 50 seconds. You're going to have to stop and heal yourself and all that stuff from time to time. There might be some peeling involved, blah, 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 blah. We'll say 70. Actually, no, we'll make the math nice and clean. We'll say 66. We'll be really, really disingenuous. And in Classic WoW, it's literally 2/3. So you get like 33. Actually, it's 33 times... No. I want 66 divided by 3 equals times 2 equals. It's 2/3. So we get 44 things back from Judgment of Wisdom. I actually don't have it written down. Let's see if I can get on here real fast. Yeah, the internet's dead. Fantastic. This is why I love China. Yeah, fuck off. Go away. Useless. Okay, and then you're probably getting something like... It's about 70, I think. Well, we'll just say 70. 70 mana a tick. Yeah, 3,000 mana back from Judgment of Wisdom, and that was me lowballing this and that and this other thing and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, you're rocking like... What was it? We're getting like... It was a 22.5 spirit ticks times 70 for like our 200 spirits. So yeah, it was about 1,600. And then we're adding like 3,000 mana from. You're not ooming. That's what I'm pointing out. You're not ooming. right? You're literally not going out of mana at like 200 spirit. Technically, you could even have like less spirit and potentially get away with it. This is without the illumination stuff and yada yada yada. But who knows? Maybe you're getting peeled here and there. Blah 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 blah. So maybe Judgment of Wisdom works differently on TBC. So even at like 200 mana with this cycle, you're not going any. You're not ooming. I think, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous here, people. Yeah. So you get spirit levels where you're able to maintain this this DPS cycle without actually ooming. The more mana you have, you're going to want more mana because it just lets you break spell fast more often. Like maybe you make your damage cycle like 2. So this damage cycle is 1. Let me think. It's a 1 Holy Shock damage cycle, 2 Seal of Justice damage cycle right now. You could switch that up if you got the mana to do so. You're like, let's try to oom ourselves in like 20 minutes as opposed to never ooming, that kind of a thing. You might change to a damage cycle of like 2 Holy Shocks and 3, I think it's 3 Seal of Justice cast before you go into your spell fast, right? So you'll stun the target, you'll do consecrations, you'll pump out your Holy Shock and your 2 judgments in that amount of time. You'll get your healing in, but then you're going to stick around. You won't start spell fasting until you get out the 2nd Holy Shock and the 3rd judgment. Then you'll start spell fasting. So the spirit actually turns into DPS. Like the spirit, no joke, actually turns into DPS over time. So I wouldn't really sleep on the idea of spirit and then getting a bunch of spirit reticks in, because you can always ramp up the DPS a bit and get higher. That's why we have a damage range here. Oh, God. The other thing I need to point out is if you're able to maintain large quantities of DPS on the target, the opposing healer simply can't keep up. So, for example, what I discovered was, do I have the healing ratios? Let's actually find the paints. So there's a second paint where I have the healers stats and statistics up. This was for the Argent Defender Paladin video. Yeah, right here. So I have like a mana heal ratio for the resto shamans. I just did it for the 2 hots primarily. I think these are the 2 hots efficiency mana ratio. We can see that a druid can maintain maybe like an 8 healing to mana ratio on their heals. Maybe they can down rank and get like a 10 mana healing ratio, like that kind of a thing. So we'll say, for the sake of argument, that druids are able to maintain a 1 mana converted into 10 healing at all times. Like, that's what they're able to do. The problem with that, however, is that if they're down ranking, they're getting less spirit regen. But they already get like 30% spirit regen in their gear. So I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying, hey, you can maintain it at 10 to 1. And we'll see if they have the mana levels to sustain it, or what kind of mana regen they need to maintain something like that. Well, how do I put this? These 2 Holy Shock Paladins can maintain an almost constant like 1,000 DPS. And 1,000 DPS is going to take them about 100 MPS, like mana per second regen, on the Druid at a 10 healing ratio, which I don't actually think they can achieve, in order to completely negate all the damage that is flowing out of these 2 Holy Shock Paladins. The Holy Shock Paladins can also ramp up the damage, not just periodically, but in general, especially if they're getting heavier on the spirit gear, to be more like 600, right? To be like 550, 600. So this is assuming like some peeling is happening, maybe some DPS is lost here, but we already talked about how you're not losing a lot of your DPS even during peeling. You're losing mostly it from the melee DPS, so I don't know, man. Let's just be like super generous to the opposing comp, right? Like, rather than it being 600 or 700 DPS, we're actually rolling out at 500 DPS. Somehow, what are you doing?
Drop something.
Okay. somehow they're maintaining like 100 mana per second per 5. Like, what does that look like? So in order for a druid not to die under these conditions, allow me to spell this out for you. The druid needs to have like 300 spirit. That'll give them the 100 mana per second regen. Okay. They need to be in 100% spirit regeneration at all times, or the equivalent thereof, like kiting and drinking, or whatever, the equivalent thereof. And then they need to be a significantly higher healing ratio than they would normally otherwise have. Their normal healing ratio is at best like an 8-to-1. Somehow they're down ranking, therefore they're casting more heals. And they're somehow getting to a 10-to-1, and yet somehow they're maintaining at 300 spirit, 100% spirit uptick time. Only then do they not die to these 2 Holy Shock Paladins just constantly leaning on them with their DPS. The point is that rather than the burst spec being scary, I'm much more interested in the sustain spec for the 2 Holy Shock Paladins over time, because I don't think the healers have the MP5 to sustain through the constant lean of the DPS. So you can either lean on their respective their DPS partner. You don't have to chase down the druid anymore. You can lean on that warlock. You can lean on that rogue. You can lean on that warrior with all your damage. And I don't think they're going to be able to keep them up indefinitely, and I actually think they'll run out of mana pretty quickly. The other kind of terrifying thing is that this comp actually still has a pretty significant burst. It's got a 16k burst, right? So if they're letting the target's HP relax, like let's say rather than jumping on the warlock, you've decided to jump on the druid, for example. You're going to pump a damage into the druid. The druid's having problems keeping his mana levels high, so he's starting to try to sacrifice his hit point totals in order to get more spirit ticks in. Like, he's trying that kind of a thing, or to get more drink ticks in. So rather than being at full life at all times with all the hots on himself, he's only got like half the hots on him, or he's letting himself drop down to like 70% life with only half the hots on him. These paladins still have the burst, right? And what's messed up about this burst combo is the way the burst combo would work, because you still need both stuns to do the burst combo effectively. The 16k burst combo at this point is you start ramping up your spell damage. You start judging Seal of Righteousness on cooldown. You start using Holy Shocks on cooldown. You start not caring about the mana costs of your spells anymore. And so rather than doing a 6-second stun and doing consecration damage, you substitute the lack of the consecration damage in the 6-second stun by just judging on cooldown, by Holy Shocking on cooldown, and then a few cycles of this later, both your stuns will be in alignment, so you can go for the 16k burst. And it's just scary, guys. Like, just leaning on them with raw DPS is kind of terrifying. There are some weaknesses here. I was talking about the things that I like and the things that I don't like. And when I talk about the things that I like and the things that I don't like, it kind of comes down to being here, like right here. Let's see. Option B, a very reactive playstyle that still healing you off and all that kind of stuff. Where if they're forcing you to use any kind of cleanse, or they're forcing you to use any kind of bubble, or they're forcing you to use any spell whatsoever, rather than having this nice clean rotation of spell fasting, you're just being much more reactive with your spell cast. It's like, hey, if they force one of us or both of us to stop to heal, that means all the DPS spells are coming out. If they're forcing one of us or both of us to cleanse, it means all the DPS spells are coming out, right? Like, if you cast one spell, you're casting all the spells, kind of a thing, which is also another reason why you probably want to have high mana levels. Like, more mana equals more DPS, just in general, to play with this comp. So when I finally get around to the pros and the cons, and I got to talk about this thing here, which is something I talk about in the Argent Defender Paladin video as well. I talk about the fact that you're only working with about 12k effective hit points, and that's like, it's really hard to catch both 2 Holy Shock Paladins in a CC burst cycle, right? because they have to get through 2 bubbles and 2 PvP trinkets, and they need 2 CCs in order to... take a drink of water. Calm down. Slow down. Whew! Lots to cover. I remade this video like 5 times, so there's a lot to talk about. Make sure I'm still recording. Get my thoughts together. Okay. What I'm trying to say is, Paladins synergize really well in 2s, and definitely in 3s, with other Paladins, primarily because they're stupidly hard to CC, right? Like, it's very easy to lock a single Paladin out of their healing. It is very hard to lock 2 Paladins out of their healing. And the reason for this is because, and I explained this in an Argent Defender Paladin video, is they need to CC... They need to throw out 2 CCs in order to lock both Paladins out of being able to cleanse the other Paladin out of the CC they're trying to do. So, for example, Rogue Druid would be, we need to stun the shit out of one of the Paladins, and we need to Cyclone the other Paladin. Only then are we effectively CCing both Paladins. And then one of the Paladin that's stunned, all he has to do is like trinket himself out of the Cyclone and either cleanse or trinket himself out of the stun and either cleanse or bop the other Paladin out. Cleanse him out. Trinkets out of the stun and either cleanses or bops the other Paladin out of the Cyclone, and it's no big deal. Or he just bubbles and laughs at them, that kind of a thing. And you have to effectively go through like 2 bubbles and then 2 PvP trinkets, and then likely there's a small window to burst on them, and then there's a good chance their PvP trinkets are back up, and it just kind of goes on into oblivion. Or you're low mana at that point, or you're under so much pressure and stress from the constant amount of DPS and the threat of the burst that there's just no room in that window anymore to actually try to DPS out these Paladins. So I'm not really sure what the hell is the comp that can effectively, in 2s at least, that can effectively lock down 2 Paladins enough that they can actually get a successful burst into them. Druid Mage comes to mind. Rogue Mage is an actual comp. Like, I actually looked up the comps a while back, and the big comps that you might run into in 2s, or like the god tier comps, as they say, if I remember correctly, it was like Warrior. It's like Warrior Priest, and then it was like I remember Rogue Mage. And then another one was like Lock Druid. And then another one was Druid Rogue. And I think Warrior. Yeah, I got Warrior Priest. Maybe Priest Druid or something. I don't know. But these were the main ones that people talked about. They were talking about like Rogue Mage, Lock Druid, Druid Rogue. Warrior Priest. Oh, I think like Rogue Lock is actually a thing. Could be. I don't know. Whatever. So I'm not really sure what combination in 2s can actually lock down these Paladins without suffering significant issues otherwise. So it's like, take Rogue Mage, for example, right? They have the lockdown because they can sheep one of you, and then they can stun the shit out of the other guy and start bursting on him. And then once the stuns are done and that poor Paladin is trying to go for a heal, then they get to like counterspell the heal, which will actually last its full duration of like 8 seconds because they don't have the spec in there. So that they can get a long CC window of locking one of the Paladins out of healing, but the other Paladin is still technically over there, like theoretically like healing. So like maybe the rogue, like, but I guess they just resheep him or something. So this combination actually has the CC to effectively lock down 2 Paladins, but this is like a super CC heavy and intensive comp. The question is, do they have the mana? And the answer is like no. By the time they're done getting through the 2 PvP trinkets, and by the time they're getting done through the 2 bubbles, they either don't have the mana or they don't have the hit points to actually do that anymore. It's like once the CC window is there, the rogue is either has no fucking hit points left, right? Because you actually have to do enough damage to these two paladins to even force out their defensive cooldowns to begin with, to even have the opportunity later down the line for the CC burst combo, and they're just not going to have the resources. So this composition just doesn't have the resources. You have a very similar issue with the warrior priest. Warrior priest will absolutely fucking shit on the burst damage comp, because you're talking about 2-second mana burns. You're talking about Mortal Strike being super taxing on this comp's healing. They're gonna wear this comp into oblivion. There's like almost no chance of victory against this comp, in my personal opinion. They have PvP trinket to counteract the first burst attempt, and then they have pain suppression to counteract the second one. And I'm just not seeing it for this. However, the spirit regenning comp can probably wear these guys down pretty hard. Maybe if the priest took like a lot of spirit gear, the warrior priest comp might be able to eke out a victory against the more spirit comp heavy one. But to be perfectly honest, if you took like 300 spirit and you're using like Judgment of Wisdom on the target, there's no fucking way the priest is going to be able to keep up. And I think the fact that you're pretty much plate, you're like a 58% damage reduction. You're wearing leather gear with like a shield, and the armor works out to be you're still gonna have about 58% armor, because you get about 10k armor from your plate gear, which you're swapping out for like leather and cloth a lot of the times. But the shield is still worth like 6,000 armor, so you're gonna be sitting at like 58% armor. The armor is going to counteract a lot of the warriors' DPS. He's going to cause them some rage issues, blah, 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 blah. You might be able to... It's going to be a nice, even, good matchup between a couple spirit-geared Holy Shock Paladins and warrior priests that actually bother to take some spirit gear as well. If the priest didn't take spirit gear, then I don't see this comp having any chance whatsoever. They're just going to and then die, because it's almost impossible. Once you put the spirit gear and the Judgments of Wisdom on two paladins, mana burn's not going to be a thing anymore. The only thing keeping this spec in the game is the fact that they have mana burn and mana burn and purges in conjunction with Mortal Strike. You take away either one of them, either of those from warrior priest, and there's no chance. That's what I'm seeing as well. Druid Rogue can't be bursted out, but I'm pretty sure that you can just grind them into pulp with your like 500 to 600 DPS. It'll be very hard for them not to get ground into pulp. They got good kiting ability, though, so they could probably get some drinks in and stuff and get back. I don't know, man. They might be able to bore you to death. Like this might be like a 20, 30, 40, 50 minute duel potentially. But that's only if the Druid came to play a sustain game, and you might just grind them into pulp anyways. Like the DPS might just be too much. The Rogue on the Rogue in particular, it might just not be able to handle. Lock Druid is even more interesting. If Lock Druid's geared defensively, I can see them potentially being like an unkillable matchup. Like you can't kill them, they can't kill you. That's kind of the potential of just sheer kite. Like if they're doing nothing but kiting and pillar humping and drinking and going into stealth, and they're just trying to bore you to death, these two classes could potentially eke out a draw or a time-based victory if they're willing to wait like hours in the arena just to beat you guys. But they technically can't kill you, I don't think. Anyways, one of the major issues I have with Argent, Defender, Pally, and Holy Shock Paladins, we'll talk about the pros and the cons. The pros for the Holy Shock Paladins is that you have high DPS. You can vary that DPS rather significantly. Like you can choose if you have the mana to ramp up the DPS. Like you can, like we're talking about before, rather than doing a 2 SOR Judgment and then a Spell Fast, a 1 Holy Shock and 2 SOR Judgment and then a Spell Fast, you have the option of ramping it up into a 3 SOR Judgment and a double Holy Shock and then a Spell Fast composition. Or you can just say, my god, we're getting so much mana back anyways, let's try to finish this inside of 10 minutes, and let's just go full bore on the DPS. And then at that point, you're just judging on cooldown with everything that's dog. and you're still getting back rather horrifying amounts of mana. Because you're probably still maintaining something like a 20% spirit tick uptime anyways, even if you're like super heavy on the DPS. And that combined with Judgment of Wisdom and like your near 9k, 10k mana bar, it's just going to be very escalatory. Like it's going to take a million years for your mana to actually drain away with that stupid spirit gear. So you have the ability to greatly increase your DPS if you want to. Not as much as you'd think, but it's definitely there. So you can ramp up to like 700, 800 DPS if you're like, damn, the mana costs, which is kind of cool. The Argent Defender Paladins definitely cannot do that. The major issues that I have, however, is you still have this 12k weakness, which means you're going to have to play very consciously around bursts, because you still only have 12k effective hit points on either Paladin. If they're forcing you to use your Holy Shocks defensively, then you've got about 16k effective. As we saw, the Holy Shocks were healing like, for 1500. I got it written down here on the burst comp. It's healing for like 1400. If you're going like the spell power spirit style, they might be they were healing for like, what was that, like 1700 or something like that. So I factored in like, yeah, whatever, we'll give them extra 4k from like the Holy Shocks. Maybe one of the Holy Shocks is a crit. And so if you can get out of their CC attempt to kill you guys and get Holy Shocks in, your effective hit points goes up to like 16k. Versus spellcasters, since you're in somewhat decent plate gear, it rises up to like 30k to 40k effective hit points against melee classes such as Druid and Ret Paladins, and well, not so much Ret Paladins because they got some spell power behind that, and Rogues, because you still got the plate gear, right? So it's mostly spell power burst that you need to be mindful of, and particularly if they have the ability to catch you in a CC chain, or if you're low mana for whatever reason. You're less scared of the melee classes, but the melee classes can peel, so it's like, eh. The Argent Defender Paladins, by comparison, they've got like 20k effective hit points against spellcasters, and then they have like 40 to 50k to being virtually unkillable to like melee classes, especially when they drop into like Argent Defender mode. A rogue and a warrior's DPS literally falls to like 10% of normal when you go into Argent Defender mode because of reasons. Mostly it's the rogue's melee attacks that stop doing damage. They literally stop doing damage. I got the stats over here somewhere. I guess I don't have it here, but things are different for the Argent Defender Paladins. But so the rogue's damage basically falls off a cliff. Well, the rogue's auto attack stop doing damage. And the reason for this is because when you go into Argent Defender mode, you get like a 75% effective damage reduction. And then the Argent Defender Paladins also have Blessing of Sanctuary, so they're reducing the damage by like 80. And then if you're a complete fucking asshole, you might throw up Blessing of Sacrifice in there as well. But ideally, you're being more DPS oriented with the Argent Defender Paladins. You're using your blessings are primarily kings and might, because you have access to kings, unlike the Holy Shock Paladins. But kings is not all that effective, so you can definitely swap it out for Blessing of Sacrifice. Oh yeah, Blessing of Sacrifice was also something I forgot to mention with their theoretical inability to CC you down. So the blessings that these paladins are primarily going to be using, I imagine, will be Blessing of Sacrifice, which reduces, it transfers 104 damage from one paladin to the other paladin, and Blessing of Might. And but that'll increase your effective hit points, and that makes it really hard to like do things like remember when I was talking about Rogue Mage, I specifically talked about sheeping one paladin and stunning the other. That technically doesn't work against a Rogue Mage. I forgot if you have Blessing of Sacrifice up, because what basically happens is you can't DPS on the sheep. You have to DPS on the stun target. But if you're DPSing on the stun target and any damage you do to the stun target is breaking the other paladin out of sheep, that's a big problem. If they try to blind the other paladin and go ham on the other paladin, Blessing of Sacrifice also screws them over there. So I guess it's, yeah, I don't know, man. I just don't know. Anyways, I'll just casually do the math here. So warriors hit for about 1k damage, base. And then if I'm reducing that by minus 75% because we fell into Argent Defender mode on the damn Argent Defender Paladins, that means that they're doing about 250 melee damage per auto attack, and they get their rage off of their white damage. So that's what we're primarily focusing on here. We're not focusing on Mortal Strike or anything else. And then you're deciding that you're going to minus this by 80, and oh, by the way, there also might be an additional minus of like 104 from Blessing of Sacrifice, and you can see that by this point they're doing about 70 damage. Now, I don't know about you, but a warrior that does like 1k base damage all of a sudden doing like 70 damage is a very, very unhappy warrior. I'm not entirely sure that he doesn't get rage off of this 104 and this 70 combined. But if he doesn't get rage off of the 104 and the 70 combined, and he's just either way, he's so rage starved as a warrior right now. His DPS is just falling off a cliff. And if the math looks like that for an Argent Defender Paladin versus an Arms Warrior, you can imagine what the math looks like against a dual-wielding Rogue. Their auto attacks begin to do absolutely no damage, even without a Blessing of Sacrifice applied. Just the minus 80 damage alone after the minus 75%, they do no auto attack damage whatsoever. So they're entirely reliant upon their energy bar to actually do damage to an Argent Defender Paladin in Argent Defender mode, and then they still have, it's not possible. Just get lost. So their DPS just absolutely falls off a cliff. So what I'm still really digging about the Argent Defender Pallies. Where do I want this? We're going over here to the skill trees now. So this is the Argent Defender Paladins. One picks up 3 out of 3 here. One gets Vindication over here. Is their DPS output it tops out at about 500. The Holy Shock Paladins sustainable DPS output is about 100 DPS higher, a little bit, maybe 100 DPS, yeah, sustainable. 100 DPS higher than the Argent Defender Paladins, which is significant. The Argent Defender Paladins are running between 400 and 500 DPS sustainable, and the Holy Shock Paladins in Spirit Gear are running at 500 to 600 DPS. Both classes can choose to become unsustainable for a time, like mana-wise, and ramp up their DPS by about 100 DPS. But the Holy Shock Paladins still end up with the higher DPS. What fascinates me, however, though, is that the Argent Defender Paladins are so freaking tanky, especially when in Argent Defender mode, that... Yeah. 20k effective hit points, and then they're virtually immune to damage from melee classes. They also get a massive DPS boost if a melee class is actually trying to hit them because they actually do have Holy Shield. I'm just talking about the comparison between the two specs. The Argent Defender Paladins are theoretically so fucking tanky that they don't have to heal as often as the Holy Shock Paladins, and they definitely don't have to use Holy Shocks defensively because they don't even have Holy Shock. That their DPS might be competitive with double Holy Shock in Spirit Gear. I honestly don't think it's competitive. I think that if you're with a couple of really good players, right, like players at the top of their Paladin game playing Holy Shock, a double Holy Shock with Spirit Gear, I think the performance is going to actually be superior to a couple of Holy Argent Defender Paladins. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, if you have a couple of Argent Defender Paladins also at the top of their game, like, what does that look like? Kind of a scenario. And the answer, very interestingly, is that certain comps, I think, might give the Holy Shock Paladins, like, a hard time. Like, if we go back over here, like, if you run into, like, double Elemental Shaman, right? So if you're going against double Elemental Shaman and they have the ability to put out, like, a massive metric shit ton of burst on you, their lightning bolts are... You might end up finding yourself as a double Holy Shock Paladin composition, like with the Spirit Regen style, where you're kind of heal locked. Meaning that they're putting out so much damage that you don't have a choice but to, like, heal yourselves. My point is, as a double Holy Shock Paladin, I comp played at the highest level. I don't see you struggling against the traditionally good comps that you would see in twos. But I see you guys potentially struggling against certain compositions that are normally not seen in twos, because they normally get rolled by like Druid Lock or Druid Warrior and that kind of stuff. Like double Elemental Shaman or double Mage might theoretically give you guys a problem, because you still have relatively low effective hit points against spellcasters. So if you're running into like a double burst spell power composition, you might have problems. However, the Argent Defender Paladins literally laugh at this shit and they give no fucks. They're just going to these comps, and because they got like 20, each of the Paladins without catching any heals is like 20k effective hit points. They got mana for days, they got sustain for days. They're going against double DPS comp that doesn't have sustain. So the way I would play it personally is I would use Argent Defender Paladins to get high in the brackets, right? To get out of the arena rating levels where you're running into what people normally consider to be the meme comps, the double DPS comps that typically don't work, but they might give the double Holy Shock Paladins a hard time. Once you're into the higher brackets and you're really only facing like, Druid this and Druid that and Priest this and Priest that, where the double DPS comps that you're worried about really don't exist anymore, like that's not what you're queuing into significantly anymore, then you can break out the Holy Shock Paladins and maintain probably a higher win rate than you would have the Argent Defender Paladins. That's if you're being super sweaty about it. Otherwise, Argent Defender Paladins. Otherwise, I'm going to try to make Argent Defender Paladin work all the way, just because it's more my playstyle. I just enjoy being super unkillable and laughing my ass off. So I'm going to try real hard to find a way for Argent Defender Paladin to kill like Lock Druid, which will be actually kind of hard for... It'll be much easier for the double Holy Shock Spirit comp than it will be for the Argent Defender Paladin comp. But the Argent Defender Paladin comp might have the capabilities of doing this. If I can find a way to kill Lock Druid, then the Argent Defender Paladin comp can probably kill anything. Like, Lock Druid is the only thing I can think of that the Argent Defender Paladin comp can't even remotely struggles against. And it only struggles in the sense that we can't kill each other. Right? Like, if the Lock Druids have taken Spirit Gear and they're just literally playing like a sustain game, like they're literally just, hey, we're going to kite you, we're going to drink, we're going to kite you, we're going to drink, we're going to kite you, we're going to drink, we're going to kite you, we're going to drink. Neither side can kill each other. We will be there for hours and hours and hours and hours with both sides being mathematically unable to kill each other. And that's the state of the matchup. Any other matchup I can think of, the Argent Defender Paladins are just going to face roll. They're going to face roll Druid Rogue, most likely. They're going to face roll Rogue Mage. They're going to face roll Warrior Priest. They're going to face roll all of the meme comps. Double Elemental Shaman, they're probably going to face roll that. Be a little scary for them, like, because the burst damage from the double Elemental Shaman is going to be very, very real. But it's going to have mana issues eventually, and they're just going to roll over it. Argent Defender is just, you can watch the Argent Defender videos. It's just too powerful. Double Warlock's not really going to have a chance. Double Priest not going to have a chance against the Argent Defender Pallies. It's just good luck. So, if you want the easy time Gladiator rating, I'm thinking Spirit Gear, Argent Defender, Paladin, double Argent Defender, Paladin is good to go. If you want to get super sweaty and try to maintain the highest win ratio possible, just to flex, then I would highly suggest using Argent Defender Paladins to get into the higher brackets. And once you're in the higher brackets, switching over to Spirit Regen, double Holy Shock, just because it has a lot more play value. I haven't talked about this thing yet. All this graph basically says is, if you're playing one of these sustain comps, right, if you're taking the Spirit Gear comp, you're far better off starting the fight for about the first 2 minutes of the fight. You are defensive and you're just healing yourself. And then as the opponents start running out of resources, their CCs are on cooldown, their abilities are on cooldown, their burst trinkets are on cooldown. They're running out of ability-based resources, or they're running out of like mana-based resources. you switch over from being primarily healing yourselves to healing yourselves less and then ramping up the DPS. This is something I talk about within the Argent Defender Paladin videos, their ability to go into Argent Defender mode in these later stages of these fights, where they're actually living inside of minus a sub 35% hit points, because they still have they still have like a ridiculous amount of effective hit points, even if they only have 30% of their lives left over. And they're able to squeeze out a bit more DPS from the Argent Defender Paladins if you're able to live in Argent Defender Paladin mode for a variety of reasons. But yeah, totally start ramping up your DPS once you don't feel threatened by the enemy comps anymore. Start being a bit more judgment happy, judging on cooldown, going for 3 judgments before spell fasting as opposed to 2 judgments before spell fasting. Stuff like that. And you can ramp up your DPS. But so far the math is saying that sacrificing some of your spell power for spirit is really good. And then playing around it, you're probably going to just face roll. I think these compositions in TBC are going to be absolutely terrifying. I am super looking forward to Argent Defender Paladin in TBC. But if you're looking forward to Holy Shock Paladin, then the exact same, the way you play and how you go about it is the type of gear you're going to be using, the type of tactics you're going to be using don't differ very significantly. Yeah, that's about it, boys. Okay, so in summary, what I would say is that the Holy Shock Paladins are significantly more lethal than both in an overtime sense and in a burst damage sense and in a overtime plus threatening burst damage sense. The Holy Shock Paladins are significantly scarier paired with each other than the 2 Argent Defender Paladins are. The Argent Defender Paladins, however, the Holy Shock Paladins, you have to be smart with them, right? Like, certain compositions actually are threatening to you in certain situations, and you just need to be mindful of that as a double Holy Shock Paladin and play around it. And if you can successfully play around that potential threatening time period, then you are objectively a superior comp to the Argent Defender Paladins, right? Because you got more DPS, you got more options, blah, 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 blah. The Argent Defender Paladins, however, are just this relentless force in Arena. They're absolutely fucking relentless. There might be some comps that they're going to struggle against just because, but there's not going to be any comp that can technically kill them. So the Holy Shock Paladins, right, there's going to be comps that can kill you, but if you're smart about playing around it, then they technically can't kill you and you're good to go. But the Argent Defender Paladin, it's literally like face roll, Keck lol W, that kind of a thing. What else is there to talk about between these two things? Argent Defender Pally, being smart about it, blah, 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 blah. There are some items like trinkets and weapons in the game that I'm currently talking with like Talrain and Peaceblade about potentially using in these 2 specs. But I don't really want to talk about it with you guys just in case they get nerfed, like Blizzard realizes their mistake and they nerf the shit out of them. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about it for now, to be perfectly honest. There's something else I wanted to say, but I can't really remember what it was. Yeah, so feel free to hit me up. Am I crazy? Am I off my rocker? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, right. What I was talking about with the differences in DPS is, like, Argent Defender Paladins are really weird in the sense that as they start wearing on their opponents and they enter this phase, they have to heal less, which means they get to ramp up their DPS more, and they potentially get to enter Argent Defender mode. I talk about all this stuff in the Argent Defender Paladin videos. So it's actually unclear to me to what extent the Holy Paladins out DPS the Argent Defender Paladins, because the Argent Defender Paladins get to be relentless. Like, they get to absolutely be relentless, and I'm not calculating in Reckoning charges into the Argent Defender Paladin's capabilities. I'm not calculating a Holy Shield, what that looks like in the Argent Defender Paladin capabilities. I'm not also calculating like Vindication into their abilities. It says reduces stats. I'm hoping that also reduces Spirit by 15%. which is technically a DPS increase in these long sustained fights. If the Holy Shock Paladins are forced to heal themselves more, like if they're forced into a situation where they have to do a lot of healing, they have to start using their Holy Shocks defensively. They have to like sit around on their ass and cast their long Holy Lights, which can potentially be interrupted. They got Curse of Tongues on them, so their Holy Lights are kind of dog shit, and they can be easily like cycloned or feared. If the Holy Paladins are being forced to spend metric shit ass fuck time, fuck loads of amounts of time healing themselves, then their DPS is going to fall off a cliff, right? Whereas the Argent Defender Paladins, if you watch the Argent Defender Paladin videos, they don't have that problem. You're not going to be forcing them to have to heal a ton of time, a lot of the time, which means they're absolutely relentless with their DPS. So it's unclear to me if the Argent Defender Paladins aren't like objectively superior in their DPS or very close to being equal to their DPS with the Holy Shock Paladins. For example, like Lock Druid, for example, the Holy Paladins can't get what is it? They cannot get Curse of Tongues off of them, and their Holy Lights are my bad. They have to use Holy Light primarily to heal themselves. They have enough plus healing that they can get away with using Flash of Lights if they have to under emergency circumstances. But under emergency circumstances, they're either going to be forced to use their Holy Shocks to heal, which means it's not being used for DPS, or they're going to be forced to use Holy Lights, which they got these long fucking cast times, and are very easy to counter, which means that they're just going to have a hard time sticking their DPS to a Lock Druid comp. Whereas the Argent Defender Paladins against this comp, because it's such low DPS, can easily go into Argent Defender mode. Then at that point, they only have to start using Flash of Light heals if they have to heal at all, and they can just continue to stick their DPS solidly into one or more of those compositions. They get a massive DPS increase against Druid versus Rogue. They get a massive DPS increase against Warrior versus Priest, because again, they don't worry about the damage anywhere near as much as I don't know. There's a lot of nuance going on between the two classes. It is objectively hard for me to decide which one is superior to the other spec. Probably going to be very matchup dependent. But I can definitely say that if you're going against like double Elemental Shaman, which is actually terrifyingly underrated, I think, just because of the monstrous burst potential they have. I guess they're not a top tier comp because Locks are a top tier comp, and double Elemental Shamans absolutely, I think, despise. I don't think they can curse, so they would absolutely despise things like Curse of Tongues. But that burst deep damage, man, is actually threatening. Double Elemental Shaman has the potential to actually clap Holy Shock Paladin out of existence because, don't even need to get all that lucky either. Like, if the Lightning Bolt is a crit and then it gets an extra 800 damage out of it, and then the Earth Shock is a crit, or the Chain Lightning bounces just right, I don't know. I just don't know. It's pretty close. I'm sure time will tell which one is objectively better, and it'll probably be a lot of debates for a long period of time as to which is objectively better, but that's just what I think. Anyways, I'm going to end the video here. I'm tired of remaking this video. I'm tired of talking. It's been an hour and a half. I want to go watch some YouTube videos. Maybe I'll just upload this video immediately. Anyways, day is full, boys.